Earlier today, we were talking about Gandhi's legacy and his relevance in today's world. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. Do you think Gandhi's ideas about an economic system that's not just focused on profit, do you think that has resonance in today's world, and do you think that that could work?
I think you have to take Gandhi in a package. You cannot take Gandhi in isolation. But the package also doesn't have to be complete. So when you talk about profits, you have to understand that Gandhi was not against business.
Right.
Gandhi's ideas can be broken down into three specific areas. According to me, this is my analysis of studying Gandhi for 60 years. One, people. See, today we spend billions and billions in developing Six Sigma quality products. All business schools teach you about Six Sigma quality products. Nobody talks about Six Sigma quality human beings. So we have a country like America where you have 1% of the people in prison. So Gandhi's idea was that for building good human resource, you need to focus on truth, trust, love, simplicity, and courage, as an example. There could be more to it. But truth really simplifies life. You need less lawyers, you can get transaction done quickly, you got to say what you believe in, and you got to believe in what you say. Most of the time people have split level consciousness. They tell you what you want to hear, they do exactly opposite. People mistrust each other. So you need a large number of lawyers and accountants and all that, because people cheat. People don't genuinely love each other. They are always trying to take advantage of somebody. So one of the things I talk a great deal about nowadays is business schools teach you more about how to extract value, but not how to create value. Gandhi talks about creating value, never about extracting value. A value will come to you if you create value. I don't need to be a great negotiator. I need to be a decent human being. But nobody teaches you how to be a decent human being. Then it's about simplicity. You got to live a simple life. Simple life implies lots of things. Okay? And then finally, you got to have courage to do what needs to be done in life. So that's one aspect of Gandhi that I sort of still try to understand. Second aspect is about planet. See, at the end of the day, there are only two things that matter in life: people and planet. Everything else is irrelevant. Business is irrelevant, finance is irrelevant, everything is irrelevant. Planet is for us and we are for the planet. So can we take care of our planet, which include environment, which include climate control, global warming,
That's right.
working from bottom up, meeting people's needs and not people's want, sacrifice. You take, for example, Amazon jungles. Whose jungles are those? Are those Brazilian jungles? Or those are the jungles of the humanity, planet? Because what happens in Brazil affects all of us.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we don't look at Earth as interconnected, monolithic mass. We have divided everything. Okay? Whose rivers are these? Okay? So I think Gandhi's idea was that you need good human beings, good soul, and you need us to take care of our planet, our ecosystem, our animals, our trees, our water, our jungles, all of that. And finally, to do these two things, what kind of platform you need? You need a platform that is focused on democracy. You have same right as I have. I got to respect you. You got to have the same freedom. I need to build a world which is inclusive. World is not inclusive today.
Right.
Few people have cornered, lot of resources, lot of power. Okay, world needs to celebrate diversity. We don't celebrate diversity. And the world really needs to finally understand that we are far away from tribal mentality, which is based on wars. We need Gandhian idea of non-violence. What is the sense in fighting? You are fighting with whom? For what? Why are you building all these machineries and nuclear power and all that? You're not using it anyway.
Right.
I mean, look at the number of nuclear heads Russia has, or Soviet Union had, and US has, and all that. Who is using it? Nobody can afford to use it. Then why build it? So Gandhi today is so relevant in the world. He was 200 years ahead in thinking, but his thinking came from very simple ideas.
Right.
So I think when Gandhi talks about profit, he's talking about trust. Not the kind of trust between us, but trusteeship. So why, you mentioned today in your talk that, 40 some odd billionaires in the world today control 50% of the wealth. Whose wealth is that? Is it really their wealth? How did they make that wealth? Who worked for them? And then the model that America has is you make a lot of money and then you donate.
Right.
But when they donate, they are in the business of giving money. They decide where they will give money, not the community. Nobody comes and says, here is the money for the community, you guys decide what you want to do. Trusteeship is about that. That we are setting up a trust.
Right.
I made this money as a billionaire, if I was a billionaire, for the next generation, not for me, because I can't spend it anyway. And when I give that money, I let you decide as a community where it should be used and not dictate my thoughts on you. That's what Gandhiji talked about.
No, absolutely, and so many threads I want to pick up on from what you said. You end with the idea that businesses should perhaps become more like institutions rather than just being privately, held for a private person's gain. And you also talked about Gandhi's idea of Sarvodaya, which is,
Absolutely.
benefit for all, and which includes the weakest member of the society. But for my follow-up question, I'll go back even further when you talked about becoming a decent human being, and you talked very briefly about the role of business schools, which have traditionally taught extraction of value, essentially. And I know that under the last UPA government, you were also advising on higher educational institutions. So I'd like to pick your brains a little bit on that. What is the role of business schools today? How can we make our students more conscientious about some of these issues? How can we go about doing that? And is that our role?
It's a loaded question. Okay. You're probably asking a wrong guy. I have very strong views on business schools. I have two children. One went to Harvard, another went to London Business School. And I believe, one, business schools are very expensive. They are out of the reach of large number of people. And these schools are very elitist in many ways. If I was to rethink through the business schools, I would begin with a very solid course on self.
Okay.
What is a self? What kind of a self you want to build? Are you comfortable with yourself? Don't be competitive. Don't compare. Don't fight. Don't be jealous. How do you teach people that? Business schools teach you exactly opposite. Okay? You're jealous because that fellow got a better job than I. Can you really be happy that that fellow got a better job? Genuinely. Okay? How do we teach that as a starting point? Say, be what you are. You are good as a person. Build a strong self inside, which is respectful, doesn't get hurt that easily. See, people have very fragile self-esteem. Everybody is ready to be hurt. Then I would teach a course on leadership, but not corporate leadership. Leadership that doesn't optimize profits. Leadership that carries people with you, build consensus, develop and empower people, and the whole different idea of leadership. Then I would teach a course on innovation, I would teach a course on entrepreneurship, naturally one on finance, one on market. But I think you need to teach about 12 to 16 courses. This whole analytical operational research and all that, according to me, is fine. I'm not undermining that. But that's at a different level.
I think the idea about a course on self is actually great. I might actually, borrow that and start that.
No problem. I'll help you on that. Also, I have some strong ideas on what kind of course you want to build on self.
But I also like the idea of self in terms of reflection, because not everyone wants to be the same thing. Not everyone wants to just earn money. So I went to a business school in India. I went to one of the IIMs. And I came out, graduated with the idea that I must get a big job and so on, and then very quickly realized that that's not where my passion lies. I want to contribute to the world. I don't want to make rich people richer, but I want to make a lot more people, have a better life.
Doesn't have to be rich. Have to
Right.
be happy.
Exactly.
Content.
So that
You
meaningful
see, I have
reflection.
a friend, I'm on the board of a Institute of Design in Chicago, which is the largest design institute in the world.
Right.
I've been on board for 10 years, and the dean of that school, design school, Patrick Whitney, who retired, I used to tell Patrick, I said, Patrick, unfortunately, best designers go work for fashion industry. Cartier, Louis Vuitton, all that. Why don't you go look at slum? He said, what do you mean? So I said, have you ever been to India? He said, no. I said, Patrick, go to India. So after 6 months of, back and forth, he finally decided to go to India. And he said, where do I go? I said, you go to Dharavi. So he goes to Dharavi and sees this mass of people living in one place, operating, happy, comfortable. And he calls me and says, Sam, this is good for 10 PhD theses.
Absolutely.
Okay. So when he retired, what does he do? He is now professor at Harvard of design on health.
Right. They have the D lab and
So he is looking at now health not as a traditional
correct.
job, but he's saying, look, wellness, happiness, and prosperity.
Right.
That is what health is. It's a whole different way of thinking.
Right.
Today's health is, you came with a problem, I'll fix it.
Right.
I'll give you medication, I'll cut something, I'll sew it up, send you home. That's not health. Health is about
Lifestyle.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is you need a whole new thinking in many of these areas. We have come to a point, and I made that comment during my talk earlier, is that connectivity, content, and sort of context is changing everything. It will change health, it will change education, it will change family relationships, it has already changed shopping, it will change transport. Everything we do today is basically obsolete, including MBA program. Okay. Now you have to start with that, not that I'm right. Don't get me wrong.
No, that's
Okay. All I'm saying is you have to start with that idea that everything we do today is obsolete because of the new tools we have.
right.
We don't have to do the same thing we have been doing with new tools. We have to say, how do we use new tools to do things that we have never done before? This question nobody is asking. I'm just finishing a book on redesigning the world. That's a crazy idea. When you tell somebody, they laugh at you. They say, who the hell are you to think of redesigning the world? So when you look at the world design, it was really initiated in early 40s by a bunch of people from US. They said, we're going to focus on 5 things: democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. To promote this design, we're going to create United Nations, World Bank, IMF, NATO, WTO, all this stuff. And we are going to create all the measurements: GDP, GNP, per capita income, balance of payment, trade deficit. And everyone agreed because they were all in ruins.
Right.
They had no options. India didn't matter because India was still colonized. China didn't matter, so there was agreement. That design has remained intact for 70 years. In 70 years, we have not built one new institution, global. Everybody follows that. Everybody says, what is your GDP? What is your GNP? Okay. And this whole idea has flourished. Now I look at this 75 years down the road and say, I said, none of these things make sense anymore. What is the next design? How do we recreate new institutions? Not try to fix these institutions because they don't work anymore.
Right.
World Bank made sense then. Do I really need World Bank now? With Goldman Sachs and JP Morgans and Citibanks and all these people. Nobody's questioning that. So I think everywhere I look around, because of the technological changes we have seen in the last 20 years, I see an opportunity to redo it.
Right.
Everything has to be redone.
Interesting. So, I think institutions tend to stay longer than they are needed. That's just the nature of that beast. But, and I'm going to conclude with this question, talking about technology. And of course, you're a technology disruptor and inventor. And you talk about the idea that technology is relevant in everything and that everything needs to change using the new technologies that we have. But are there any specific areas that you think technology has most power to affect social change and social good? Any one or two or three areas that?
I think there are 4 or 5 key technologies which are going to change this world. I may not be around to see the change. One is definitely telecom, IT, software, cloud computing, big data, analytics, machine learning, and this whole category. Another one is biotech, nanotech. Third one is materials. So if you take these 3 big buckets, you find a future where people will live much longer. So lifespan may be 150 years, 200 years, okay, because they'll replace all your parts. They'll inject stem cell, something to redo your, sort of system.
Right.
And you will see a time when telecom is already free, almost. You'll have energy free. You'll have transport free. So in a city like this, you will use your phone and call self-driven car and go wherever you want to go and won't have to pay anything.
Right.
That will be part of your tax. Okay. So when you have transport free, energy free, communication free, and food is going to be so cheap because we can produce so much that you won't have to work for food. Then world will change to a point you won't have to work 40 hours a week to survive.
Right.
You may have to work for 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, and you will have good life. What do you do with your time? You discover other people. You explore world. You travel. You learn. You learn to cook differently. You learn to, different language. And that is the power of information society.
Right.
Is that it will free you up from all this routine stuff that we have been locked up in for ages and ages just to survive. When self-driven car comes to play in next maybe 3, 5, 7, 10 years, first I won't need a car. I won't own a car, sorry. I meant I won't own a car. 2, I don't need garage. I have 4-car garage. I won't need parking space. I won't need driver's license. I won't need insurance. I won't have accidents. Okay. In addition, today we make 50 million cars a year. But if I have automated car, you will make only 5 million cars a year because 90% of the time car is parked.
Correct.
So when I make 5 million cars a year, I don't need that much steel.
It frees up resources.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay. My roads are not going to be cluttered.
Right.
I won't need parking space. Look at the impact of just that little idea.
Right.
And that is connected to big data, analytics, all that stuff. Okay. So you will see all this in education, health, transportation, communication. These are the big requirements, and agriculture. Somebody in the US is doing a study where per acre they can produce 300 times more food. 300 times.
Wow.
It was in Wall Street Journal. Now what does it mean?
Yes.
Okay, that means food will be so cheap it doesn't really matter. You won't have to work. That's the world we see. You may see it, I may not.
May that day come soon, I would hope. Thank you very much, Mr. Pitroda, for taking the time to share these amazing reflections with us. We really appreciate that. Thank you.